Hello guys, welcome back to the MMA Soccer Podcast. My name is Frazer Krohn and I'm back after a week off last week. Obviously, there was no UFC this weekend. We had a really good PFL Europe card. It got off to a bit of a slow start, but it is what it is. And now we've got three good cards to I say three good cards. We've got two good cards to look forward to this weekend. So what this show is going to be quite a short show, I think. I'm just going to look back at PFL Europe 3 or PFL Paris, whatever you want to call it, the semi-finals, on what was a huge night really for PFL ahead of their sort of championship, or their night of championships, as it were, the PFL finals next month in November. I'm going to give a brief preview on the UFC coming up this weekend. I think it's from the Apex again, which is disappointing, but it is what it is. And then I'm going to go on to talk about the epic Bellator card, because it's all about Bellator this weekend, really. Bellator are putting on, without a doubt, their biggest ever show. But like I said, we'll go on to talk about that a little bit later on in the show. What I did want to touch on is PFL Europe 3. I'm sure you all will have seen. I'll link the results below. I updated the results on MMAsoccer.com. I'll link those results below. But the results are, or the key results, should we say, are as follows. John Mitchell won his fight, as did Jacob Kazuba. They'll meet in the lightweight final. Franz Malambo beat Mokhtar Benkassi. I apologize for butchering the pronunciation of that one. In the bantamweight final, he'll meet Khurshid Karazov, who beat Ali Talib. That was a really, really good fight at bantamweight. He beat him over three 5-minute rounds, 15-minute distance. That was really fun. On the day of weigh-ins, Manuela Marcaneto missed weight, and therefore her opponent Valentina Scazzi didn't actually have to compete, and yet still made her way to the final. And she will meet Dakota Ditcheva. Everybody who's ever listened to this show from the past knows how big a fan I am of Dakota Ditcheva. I've interviewed her on the channel. I'll link the interview below. Or I'll try and link it somewhere on. I'm still getting used to this whole YouTube, embedding videos and whatnot. So I'll try and link it somewhere around here, or down there, or down there. You'll be able to find that interview quite easily. So yeah, Ditcheva will meet Scatasi in the final in Dublin in December. Simeon Powell, taking on Daniel Ladero on short notice. He was 3-2 at the time as a pro, having lost his last two. He did take the fight on a day's notice, so I'm not too mad about that. And he went the distance with Simeon Powell, and he asked Simeon Powell some questions. Simeon, just answered all those questions 9-0. Now it's a phenomenal talent. And Jacob Nido scored a massive, I was going to say the biggest finish of the night, but it certainly wasn't. There's two, maybe even three that were better than that one. He finished his opponent in the first round, booking a fight against Simeon Powell in Dublin in December. That is going to be a really closely contested, really competitive fight, and that's probably going to be that's probably going to be the headline, unless they do it like they did this card, where they've got two fights that sort of showcase fights that aren't the headline. I think that will be the headline, because that's a really closely contested fight, and obviously it's the heaviest fight, as it were, on the of the four tournaments. We've obviously got, like I say, the light heavyweights, the women's flyweights with Dakota, the bantamweights, and the lightweights, and then topping off the bill, we had the co-main event with Abugratmahinov, the Lazy King. The two-weight Ares world champion, just getting back to winning ways. We haven't seen him since January, when he fought out his contract with Ares. There was discussion of him potentially fighting for the UFC, potentially fighting for one championship, Bellator. Everybody wanted his name. He signed with the PFL, and he got off to a winning start with a really good rear naked choke victory over Brad Wheeler, and a crazy upside down celebration on on the cage. You know, he's 17-1 now, hasn't lost since 2019. He's really good, and I can see him being a real problem. I do wish there was a little bit more competition at middleweight in the PFL, but we'll have to wait and see if they do sign any more sort of, you know, high level middleweights. And then topping the bill, Cedric Doubmbe. If you haven't seen the knockout, it's 9 seconds long. It was Cedric Doumbe's night. So what the two fights I really want to touch on are Dakota Ditcheva's and Cedric Doumbe. Like I said, Simeon Powell, he got the unanimous decision victory. Daniel Lorado was, you know, he was there, he was in the fight for the full 15 minutes, as it were, but he never threatened Simeon. Simeon was on a different level. First of all, he's preparing for this card, something that I don't believe Lorado was, coming in on short notice. And, you know, he just showed a well-rounded game again. You know, he was really quick, with his feet were really quick, and, you know, it was a really good performance. But yeah, the two I want to talk about is Cedric Doumbe and Dakota Ditcheva. So I'll talk about Ditcheva first, just because her performance was first on the night, as it were. Progressed to 9-0 with yet another finish. But what I was so happy about with this fight is Cornella Home. Going into it, she had no business being in there, and I doubled down on that. I don't think she was good enough to even cause Dakota any problems, but she actually did. She didn't call Dakota problems, I wouldn't say, but she certainly she was certainly asking Dakota questions. You know, she took her down. Dakota managed to get back up. There was a bit of a scramble where she had her back at one point. But these are the questions that we need to be answering for Dakota. She's won every single fight. Every single one of the fights that she's won via stoppage, apart from one, which was her last fight for UAE Warriors ahead of joining with joining the PFL last August. Obviously against Hasna Gaber. I went to her debut in London. It was a phenomenal debut. She got a huge pop that night. You know, 58-second win in the first round. Second fight, 4 minutes 20 of round one. Third fight, 3 minutes 52 of round one. This fight went into the third round, but what a finish! All the way up until the third round, it was Dakota was cruising to a victory, but she never let her foot off the gas. And what was so entertaining about it is that, you know, no disrespect to these women, but they just don't hit as hard as the men. It's quite simple, but she does. It's something in the water at ATT, because she does go out to Florida to train, and it's where Amanda Nunes, you know, famously pretty much made her career alongside Mike Brown and the guys at ATT. That's where Dakota goes, and she just hits so hard. Yes, that, you know, that the thing is, for me, there's a level of opponent skill-wise. I don't think there's a level of opponent chin-wise. Now, what I mean by that is that Home had skill for skill, had no business being in there with Dakota, but she could take a shot. And I compare it a little bit to Sean O'Malley. You know, Chris Martinio's debut, had no business being in there with Sean O'Malley skill for skill, but you could take a massive whack, and that's why he made it to the third round. You know, you've got, just because you may not be the most experienced in MMA or even the best skill-wise, you know, it doesn't mean that you can't take a shot. And Home really could really take a shot off Dakota Ditcheva, but Dakota hit so hard, and she mixed it up. She was whipping leg kicks to the back of the knee of Home, and then the finish with the shot to the body, and then the shot upstairs was magnificent. She's going to be a massive star in MMA. There's no doubt about it. She's really good on the mic. She's undefeated in honor. She's really good. She's really, first and foremost, she's really good at fighting. She's really good at MMA, but she's really good on the mic as well. She's likable. She's relatable. She's got a big following from the UK, and now, you know, that following is beginning to potentially go stateside as she makes a bigger name for herself, and she deserves it. She's a really nice person, and I do genuinely think that she is going to be an absolute mega star in the world of MMA. Will she fight out her whole career in the PFL? Who knows? we know that she's obviously got at least one PFL fight left in a that will obviously take place on the 8th of December in Dublin. And then if she wins that, she'll be entered into the $1 million tournament next season. That's an exciting prospect. Further than that, who knows? That's for Dakota and her management and the PFL to kind of decide. But, you know, she's 25 years old. She fights out of Manchester top team and trains American top team. She's got a history of fighting. She's got a fighting family. A brother, I believe, is one of her sort of coaches in Padman. Her mum used to be I think a Thai boxing world champion. So, you know, it's in her roots, and, you know, we'll try and speak to Dakota again soon on the channel. I think Jeremy's spoken to her again previously as well. But yeah, I thought hers was one of the definitely one of the finishes of the night, as was the finish in the main event with Cedric Doubmbe. He had to win that fight. The card was essentially built around him, and he delivered in 9 seconds, which had none other than French megastar, football megastar, Kylian Mbappe, gobsmacked. He was cage side alongside, I know Dembele was there and Hakimi was there. Can you tell that I'm also into my football quite big, quite a lot. I do quite a lot of writing on my own personal channel as well, my own personal website as well. So be sure to check that out. But yeah, going back to the roots, as it were, with MMA, Doumbe was, you know, if you haven't seen it, I'll you know, the videos on MMA Sucker's Twitter, MMA Sucker on Twitter. So go and check that out. But he had to win that. There was a lot of pressure on his shoulders. He was shouting stuff at the crowd. He was walking out with a mattress, I believe, stuff like that. A lot of theatrics. And when it mattered, he delivered in a massive way in 9 seconds. They got into his opponent threw a kick. He caught the kick and slept his opponent. Phenomenal stuff. And with Doumbe, there really are no limits to how good he can be. Really, you know, he fights at 170. I don't think he could make 155, but, you know, there's potential for him to be a 170-pound star next season in the PFL Championship. And who wouldn't watch a fight between him and Sabri Sai? He remains undefeated in his MMA career. Let's not forget the UFC had signed this guy for Paris last year. The Paris Commission, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, someone get in the comments and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the Paris Commission didn't think Doumbe was experienced enough to take on Darian Weeks, and therefore the fight was cancelled. Darian Weeks then, I think, went on to fight a week later and lost that fight and got cut from the UFC. But the UFC had this guy on their books and cut him. Kind of says all you need to know about the UFC at the moment. But, you know, I think this was a really big night for the PFL. The European show, you know, we've got the Challenger Series and we've got the European shows, and they're not as big as the PFL of, like, sort of championship events. But what I do think in this case is that it's certainly sort of got them in the mainstream, as it were. You got the viral moment with Dakota's knockout and with Doumbe's knockout, and I think that's going to be really big for the guys and girls that competed on this card. Overall, really good night for the PFL. It started off quite slow. There were a lot of back-to-back decisions. We had 5-6 decisions in a row. Then you had Star Pearlie's corner stoppage, and then really Dakota really lit the crowd up. But elsewhere, aside from those two fights, we had Chanel Dyer progressed to 3-0. She's really good. She's really young. She's 22 years old, and I think the PFL is probably the right place for her at the moment. Now we're going to look ahead to this weekend, because we've got, you know, in the world of MMA or combat sports, as it were, we've got the Contender Series on Tuesday, as per usual. We've got a one championship card on, I think, Friday, an LFA card on Friday, an Octagon card on Friday. Sorry, these are all on Saturday. An Octagon card on Saturday. We've got a really big boxing match here in the in the UK in Sheffield. Lee Wood versus Josh Warrington, the WBA featherweight title. Lee Wood obviously won that featherweight title last time out against Mauricio Lara. Terry Harper takes on Cecilia Breakhouse, which is again a really big fight. Kieran Conway returns, as does Hopi Price. So yeah, that's a pretty solid card from here in the UK. You've also got UFC Fight Night. Now, this is not a good card. I'm going to just come out and say it straight up. I don't think this is a very good card. I don't think it's a very entertaining card. I don't get it. I just don't get it myself. This is 100% a card that the UFC have been told by ESPN Plus that they have to put on a card. You have to put on X amount of cards. You just had a big pay-per-view. You've just had a pay-per-view, a fight night in front of fans with in Paris. You've just had a fight. You just had a pay-per-view, obviously in Australia. You've got a pay-per-view coming up on Fight Island. This is without a doubt a filler pay-per-view. And I think, with the greatest respect to both guys, the headline tells you all you need to know about this. As far as this is a five-round fight between Grant Dawson and Bobby Green. Now, the fight itself is not a bad fight at all. It's, in fact, a really good fight. But is it a headline fight that anyone's really going to be interested in? You've got Grant Dawson. He's riding a massive win streak. He hasn't lost in the UFC, undefeated since 2016. I'm just going down his Tapology record here. He's got the win out last time out. He got the win over Damir Ismagulov, but that was Ismagulov, who had kind of retired and came back on fairly short notice. Then he's got the win over Mark Madston. Then he's got the win over Jared Gordon. He's got the win over Leonardo Santos, Nad Narimani. The somewhat disgraced Derek Miller. Julian Arota, he's got a win over. So, Grant Dawson is legit, and everybody knows Bobby Green. 30, 14-1 record. He kind of shot to fame, as it were, again. He's always a good talker, but he kind of shot to fame with his win over Ala Quinto when he knocked him out. And then he beat Nasrat Haqparast, stepped in on short notice against Islam Makhachev. Then he fought Drew Doumbe and lost. He had a no contest with Jared Gordon due to a clash of heads. Last time out, he beat Tony Ferguson in the third round by arm triangle choke in a fight that he was probably winning. He was winning that fight. But for me, it's just not a main event. It doesn't have... All main events in my eyes should have some sort of implication for the division. Grant Dawson's ranked number 10. Bobby Green isn't in the top 15. You can't tell me that Rafael dos Anjos, Jalen Turner, Renato Moicano, obviously Matt Fravola's booked, Diego Ferreira, Dan Hooker, none of those guys were interested in a fight. If Grant Dawson wins this fight, it does nothing for him. He doesn't move up in the rankings. He doesn't move down in the rankings if he loses. Bobby Green wins this fight, he probably moves into the top 15. It just doesn't do anything for me. There's exciting fights up and down the card. Joe Pfeiffer versus Abdul Razak Al Hassan. Al Hassan coming off that 28-second. It's in the second round, but he's coming off a win. We know all about him. He's a knockout machine. Joe Pfeiffer also a finishing machine. If you remember last time out, we saw him finish Jared Mershat. That should be a fun fight. But again, that has no implications for the division, which is why it's not a headline. I'm here for that fight. Got the return of Joaquin Buckley again at 170. He knocked out Andre Fiallo last time out. He faces Alex Morono, who again is a really good fighter. He's finished Tim Means last time out. We've got Drew Doumbe versus Ricky Glenn. I don't quite understand this fight. Drew Doumbe seems to be constantly on the cusp of a top 15 shot. He did lose to Matt Favola last time out, but prior to that, he was on a 3-fight winning streak, all of which were finishes. Ricky Glenn, I can't remember the last time he won. Joaquim Silva back in June of 2021. for me, this seems like a fight that's been put on the card in case any of the headliners fall out, and Drew Doubе will step into that position. You got Philip Lins versus Iron Cutelaba. Cutelaba is the obviously more recognisable name in that one. He beat Tanner Boser in April. We're supposed to face Ovin St. Preux last time out, but Ovin St. Preux popped hot. Philip Lins, I believe, makes his... Oh, no, yeah, so he makes his fifth... He's actually been in the UFC for quite a while. Five fights. He's had a lot of cancelled fights. Just looking down his record now, he's had 10 cancelled fights in the UFC. Sorry, 9 cancelled fights in the UFC. I'm not quite sure what's happened. You know, he had 3 cancelled fights with Ben Rothwell. It is what it is. But again, you know, these are fight night guys. Bill Algeo versus Alexander Hernandez got fight of the night written all over it. That's down at featherweight. Hernandez obviously going back down to with Alexander Hernandez, if you remember, he burst onto the scene in no time at all and knocked out Beneil Dariush in 42 seconds. And then he went up and fought Oliver Aubin-Mercier and beat him by decision. Then he lost to Cerrone. Then he beat Trinaldo. Then he lost to Doubе. Then he beat Gruismacher. Then he lost to Thiago Moises. Then he beat Mike Breeden. Then he lost to Renato Moicano. Then he dropped down in weight and lost to Billy Q. Then he went back up to lightweight and beat Jim Miller. Now he's going back down in weight to look to beat Bill Algeo. I mean, if a man doesn't know his weight class, that is the man. But that should be a really fun fight. Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Diana Belbita. Kowalkiewicz, obviously, she lost hers 5 in a row. She's now on a 3-fight winning streak. This is her level at the moment. Diana Belbita. Belbita won her last one out against Oliveira in June. I mean, it'll go 15 minutes, but it's a fun fight all the same. I think the only 2 other sort of highlights for me on the card, Vanessa Demopoulos returns. She obviously started a UFC career quite well with 3 straight wins. She obviously then lost. She missed weight and then lost to Karolina Kowalkiewicz last time out in May. That was on the undercard of Mackenzie Dern versus Angela Hill. Wasn't a good look for her to lose weight and then lose the fight to Karolina. We'll see how she bounces back. She's actually facing Kanatsuko Murata. Murata's really good. Really, really good. She beat Emily Ducote in Invicta. She beat Randa Marcos by decision in her last fight. She was finished by Jandiroba, but that was a doctor's stoppage because I think she sort of broke her arm or dislocated her shoulder, from what I remember. And Montella De La Rosa is back. I really like Montella De La Rosa. I think she's really good. I think she probably, aside from Mackenzie Dern, got the best jiu-jitsu in the division. She's had a tough time with it. She did lose to Macy Barber by decision in that boring fight where both ladies kind of just pushed each other into the cage, and she lost to Tatiana Suarez last time out. She was supposed to be facing Stephanie Egger in this one. Stephanie Egger is replaced by JJ Aldrich, who only fought last week. She fought the week, but did she? Oh no, sorry, it's my dates are all over the place. But she fought in Singapore and got a stoppage victory in that one. So she she's enjoying a bit of good form. That was her first finish victory actually since 2015. So she's certainly riding. She'll be riding the wave into this Montella De La Rosa fight. For me, this weekend is all about Bellator 300. Now, you won't hear me very often saying this weekend is all about Bellator, but the UFC really dropped the ball. They should have put on a massive card to rival Bellator 300, and they haven't. And I don't think this fight night is going to get many views at all. Bellator 300 is a really solid card. 4 title fights, plenty of recognizable names further down the card. You know, it's the 4 title fights for me that really kind of make the difference. You've got on the prelims, you've got Sarah McCann, I think, making a Bellator debut. So she made a Bellator debut in April. She now faces Leah McCourt. Humongous step up in competition for Leah McCourt. McCourt obviously lost. She's lost twice now. Sinead Kavanagh, back in February of last year, and then she lost early this year to Kat Zingano. It's a fun one. It's a real fun one. But that's that's what it is. It's a fun fight, but it's all about the 4-fight main card, all title fights. Strap in. It's going to be a long night. You know what Bellator are like, but it's going to be worth it. It really is going to be worth it. We've got Liz Carmouche versus Aaliyah Leigh McFarlane. Now, Liz Carmouche obviously left the UFC on the back of that title loss to Valentina Shevchenko. And she did really well. She went on a 3-fight win streak, Diana Bennett, Vanessa Porto, and Kana Wantabe. She then got back-to-back finishes of Juliana Vasquez. And then last time out, battered Diana Bennett in their rematch to a 4th-round finish. Aaliyah Leigh McFarlane is the former champion, the long-time champion. I think she was 13-0 at one point. And then she lost to Velasquez. And then she lost to Justine Kish. Since then, she's come back twice. She got two decision victories. It's a tough one to call because this is McFarlane's probably last chance to be a Bellator champion again. And Liz Carmouche, at 39 years old, if she loses this, does she continue on with the career? I'm not too sure. Which is exactly the same things we can say about a lot of people on this card. There's 4 title fights and they're already good. The main event is the main event for a reason. The co-main event is the co-main event for the reason. The third title fight on the card is Ryan Bader versus Linton Vassell for the heavyweight championship. Now Bader, last time out he fought Fedor, he fought Chet Congo before that, he fought Valentin Molodowski before that. Ryan Bader's a guy that never made it in the UFC. He was in a 2-weight Bellator world champion, and then he just, for want of a better phrase, just badly beaten by Vadim Nemkov, and he was never able to get that light heavyweight. And he now at 35, whatever he is, he's 40 years old. Brian Bader's 40 years old. He doesn't want to cut the weight down to 205, which is totally understandable. He faces Linton Vassell, who himself is in the spring chicken, also 40 years old. On paper, I appreciate this fight night is looking a bit dicey, but bear with me. It's a rematch of their 2017 fight. Bader won that fight by ground and pound in the 2nd round. Since then, Vassell, he went on to lose to Phil Davis and lose to Molodowski after that. But then he beat Sergey Karatanov, he beat Ronnie Marks, he beat Tyrone Fortune, he beat Timothy Johnson, he beat Moldovsky in their rematch. He's earned his title shot. And I really hope he can get it done, 24-8-0. He's a pioneer, I think, of Bellator MMA, and he deserves a shot at the belt. If we're going to talk about pioneers, that leads us quite nicely into the women's featherweight titles fight that's on this card. Kat Zingano is challenging Chris Cyborg for the women's featherweight title. Chris Cyborg enjoying a 6-fight winning streak. 5 of those have come in Bellator. She challenged for the Bellator title on her debut against Julia Budd, won that in the 4th round. She then beat Blenko in the 2nd round, Leslie Smith in the final round, Sinead Kavanagh 1st round, Blenko again then by decision. She then ventured into the world of boxing, beat some girl, Gabrielle Holloway, on the Crawford versus Avanesian undercard. And now she faces Kat Zingano. Now, Kat Zingano has been she wanted this fight when both women were in the UFC. She's wanted this fight for a very, very long time. She's riding a 4-fight winning streak. You could argue it's a 6-fight undefeated streak because of that sort of toe to the eye that she suffered against Megan Anderson. But joining Bellator in 2020, she beat Gabrielle Holloway, she beat Olivia Park, she beat Pam Sorensen, and the last time out, she beat Leah McCourt. She's been a lot more active than Chris Cyborg. She's got a wrestling heavy style that could potentially cause Cyborg problems. She is 41 years old, but that could lean in her favor, that she's got that kind of mom strength, as it were, to lean on. It's a good fight. I think Chris Cyborg wins it, and I think she probably knocks her out because Kat Zingano's striking has never been a strong point. She's always been a grinding wrestler, and I just think that Chris Cyborg is going to be too big and too strong for Alpha Cat. But finally, Kat Zingano is getting that shot at Chris Cyborg. This is the shot that she's been waiting for years, and I'm excited for the prospect that she might, she might pull off an upset. She might become Bellator champion at 41 years old. Who knows? But for me, yeah, this is all about the main event. It's in the, I believe it's the Bellator lightweight tournament. Let me just double check that before I go spouting that out. Lightweight. Yeah, I believe this is the it's the semi-finals of the lightweight Grand Prix. So you've got Usman Nurmagomedov, the undefeated Nurmagomedov, 17-0 with a grand total of 14 finishes, all of which have been pretty dominant. He beat Patricky Pitbull for the belt back in November of last year. In the first round of the Grand Prix, he beat Benson Henderson by first round rear naked choke. He takes on Brent Primus, who is a former Bellator lightweight champion himself. You remember, he got the controversial, shall we say, victory stoppage of Michael Chandler in Bellator New York City when Chandler's foot kind of ceased to work, as it were. He's not undefeated. He then went on to lose against Chandler. He lost a split decision, and he was actually finished by Alexander Shelby, a guy who's on the other side of the bracket, in June of last year. He won his opening fight in this in this tournament. For me, this is not going to be close. This is Nurmagomedov, in my opinion, is going to win the whole tournament. This is all building to a Nurmagomedov versus Patricky Pitbull rematch in the final. When again, I think I believe Usman's going to win. I struggle to see how anybody else wins that fight in a word. Going to Bellator 300, Usman Nurmagomedov is probably going to become 18-0. Brent Primus isn't an easy guy to finish. I really don't think he is, but I do think he is. He does get finished in this one. The thing is, if he can get it down to the floor, which is not going to be an easy thing against anyone with a second name Nurmagomedov, but he is good on the floor. He's got very good jiu-jitsu. For someone that's as sort of heavily muscled as Primus, he does have really good jiu-jitsu, but I just don't think it's going to be enough for this one. I'm picking Nurmagomedov all day, but I will definitely be tuning in because it is a really, really good Bellator card. Like I said, Bellator 300, they've beaten the UFC this week and done it with relative ease because the UFC haven't put on a particularly great card. But that's it for today's show, guys. Any comments, any questions, any thoughts on what I've been talking about, drop it in the link below. Drop it in the comments below. Sorry, I'll link all of my personal links down below. Be sure to follow and do us a favor on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Leave a review, follow the show. It really helps me out. I'm still, I'm getting a little bit more used to now having to do the podcast on my own. Hopefully we'll get a few guests on from time to time, but any support that you guys can give to the show and to the channel, it's really much appreciated. But yeah, that's me for now. So next Monday I'll be looking ahead to another UFC card with someone I'd actually describe as a friend of mine. She's competing, Melissa Dixon. She's competing on the she's making a UFC debut. I'll be breaking down what was, as it were, and of course we'll be going live on the podcast if there's any huge breaking news this week. So until then, guys, take it easy and thank you for your time.